Hey everyone, this is Dale from Sierra Outdoor Survival up here in the Sequoia National Forest. And as you can see behind me, came up here to do a survival build, survival shelter build. It is a modified A-frame slash plow point, and I'll talk about it in a minute. Stay tuned. Today, I'm going to talk about the good and bad about this shelter, this survival shelter. It is a combination of an A-frame and a plow point shelter and the tools that I utilized. My goal in creating this shelter was to utilize no string and whatever I could scrap from the area. The tools that I utilized was my axe, my belt knife, my bow saw. The reason I picked this bow saw is kind of a tryout. Notice that it does have larger teeth on it. That's an advantage and disadvantage. With the wood that we had to utilize in this area, a lot of it is scrap downed wood, dead wood. It's very hard, very brittle. To be honest, through trial and error, a silky would have worked much better. The reason I picked this saw is because it also comes with two additional blades. One for metal, the other is for processing game, a bone saw. With that said, the final tool that I utilized was a Scotch eye auger bit. Whereas my other two partners prefer to tie things up, I prefer to screw them. Now, as I was describing earlier, my original plan was to create an A-frame. So, but with that and the limited resources that I had in this area, it made it more difficult. So, seeing this log, I thought, and I had my auger bit. So what I did was created I drilled a hole in the back here, and my center pole I inserted into this log. So with that, lesson learned, utilize what you have on hand, adapt, overcome. So from this point, it's a little bit of a higher plow point, so I actually had space for my head in the back here, so that if you sit up, you don't knock your head and knock over your shelter or injure yourself. So this particular shelter did end up becoming a little bit larger. The advantage to that was that I had more room to move around, and I had the headroom instead of completely lying on the ground and sneaking in and out of my shelter on my hands and knees. I actually do have a little bit more room to enter into it, and you'll see that in a moment. Now, also utilizing the materials that are in the area, the bark on this tree was quite loose. So that gave me the advantage of not having to utilize as many fern and pine boughs to cover my entire shelter. So utilizing the bark, I tried to keep it as large pieces as possible. Now the advantage to that is that you have larger material, so you don't have to work as hard to get this other smaller material. The disadvantage of it is that you have to be careful to make sure that your structure is sound enough to support the additional weight. So what I did in here, I went halfway up the frame with what bark I could locate, and the rest I used the pine boughs. And underneath even there's some strategically placed bark areas. Now, utilizing bark though, you have to be careful. You have to look at the bark, make sure it's not infested with bugs, because you certainly don't want that falling on you in the middle of the night. So as I described earlier, this was the beginning of the front part of the A-frame. Using the Scotch eye, I utilized it to create the hole and the peg. Now this peg, of course, is attached to the center ridge pole, and that went through both of my A-frame poles. So they're all held together nice and tight. So the inside of my bedding, what I did was I had these contractor bags, wanted to check them out. They worked fairly well, but they do have some sag. I have the main beams, one on each side, and the cross beams. What I did was I put the cross beam in between the two long beams. That way you spread them out and it creates that tautness. So my butt isn't on the ground. And on top of that, I laid it across two logs at my head and at my feet. And that elevated my body a good 6 inches above the ground, so that even counting with the sag, I was probably about 3 inches above the ground. And inside, I have my sleeping bag and I have my 100% wool blanket, which this was a lifesaver. It was great. The temperatures got down to the high 30s, and with this system, I was nice and toasty. So with that said, let's look at the good and the bad, the advantages and disadvantages of this shelter. The advantage is that, yes, of course, I utilize all the material that was available in the landscape. The disadvantage is that it took a hell of a long time to build. Now, this shelter, a lot of people think, oh yeah, I'll just build off the land and I'll build a shelter, a natural shelter, no problem. That's all well and good. However, it also very much depends on the material available and the quality of that material. Things are a lot different back east where I grew up as they are out west here. The wood out here, the California cedars and the wood and the sequoias, it's all well and good. However, it's so crooked, as you can see from a lot of the shelters. It's hard to find a straight piece of wood, but that might just be California. I don't know. So as I was saying, the good and the bad of this shelter is that it's good to utilize nature and what it provides to you. However, it can be a little bit of a pain in the ass. This shelter took a lot of time to build. So if you think that you're gonna put this shelter up like that, no, it takes a lot of time. So those again are the advantages and disadvantages of this shelter. And with that said, this is Dale from Sierra Outdoor Survival. So make sure that you like and share this video and visit us at sierraoutdoorsurvival.com.